So welcome, Eugene. I have your bio here at the back of the book. So I'm going to share a little bit from there, but then I definitely want to hear in your own voice, because certainly this is the formal representation of who you are. So Eugene Schneeberg is an expert on fatherhood, as well as a sought-after speaker, consultant, and trainer in the field of violence prevention, children of incarcerated parents, and prisoner reentry. He provided strategic advice to the White House Office on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships and the Department of Justice after being appointed director by President Barack Obama. Eugene's leadership resulted in numerous innovative new policies, practices, and grant programs focused on promoting responsible fatherhood, prisoner reentry, assisting children with incarcerated parents, and preventing youth violence. Eugene led the Department of Justice efforts as part of President Obama's Responsible Fatherhood Initiative and the My Brother's Keeper initiative. This resulted in over $30 million in new grants for incarcerated young fathers and mothers. He co-chaired the Obama administration's federal working group focused on identifying policy reform strategies to improve outcomes for children of incarcerated parents, resulting in over $6 million in new grant programs. While serving on the Attorney General's Federal Interagency Reentry Council, Eugene worked to launch a new $10 million Youth Opportunity AmeriCorps grant program. Eugene left the Obama administration to begin consulting on local and national responsible fatherhood projects. In 2017, he founded Fathers Forward, LLC, which assists nonprofit and government clients with improving child well-being by effectively engaging and equipping fathers. So welcome, Eugene.
Thank you, Pia. Yes, it's my honor to be with you, Professor Pia, and thank you for everybody for jumping on. Shout out to everybody that's on from BU. It's good to see everybody.
Yes. So I met Eugene, as I mentioned, back in Boston University. So this was in the 90s. A lot of us came from New York. He was from Boston, but we had such a similar overarching experience of being in an urban city in America. Kelly's a justice advocate around urban planning and decarcerating our urban planning and what has been done across our country and across the United States to marginalize communities, specifically African-American communities, at the root of everything around the country. And so the experience that Eugene shared, even back then when we were just all talking down in the lobbies of our schools and on West Campus and in the GSU, as reminded, was really kind of piecing together the similarities of our stories, but then at the same time, coming of age and recognizing the disparities in these stories. And that many of us, even represented here right now on this Zoom screen, had gone to a varied experience of public schools in the communities we were from, and then also in many instances were bused or went to boarding schools in other places to acquire what we so-called deem, I guess, a better education, whatever loaded term that might mean, and then found ourselves at Boston University at this zeitgeist of time in 1995, 1996, just at the cusp of sort of overcoming somewhat the depths and trenches of the crack epidemic across our urban cities. And all of us, I believe, being very deliberate and focused on how we're going to not only, nourish our own minds in the movement, but how we're going to grow collectively and really improve and impact and share together in our communities. So these were the conversations we were having back then. So this is an absolute blessing to be here 22 years exactly later and know that we have been journeying collectively. And while we've been in this crisis of this 3 years that has distanced us, this is unique that we're able to be on this Zoom screen in different cities together. So I take this as a divine intervention in itself, that this is able to happen because of Zoom. So I'm grateful for you to be here. I want you to introduce yourself also, and then we'll jump in a little bit more to hear about your book, I Never Met My Father.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you guys for taking time out of, I'm sure, very full schedules to be here. As was said, I'm Eugene Schneeberg. I'm excited to share my new book with you. It's been, a labor of love. I tell people I first started writing my mother's story when I was in high school. So I felt like, my mother raised me and my sister by herself, and I saw kind of the effects of trauma in her life on her. And I felt like it was important that I tell her story. So in high school, I literally just started asking her questions about her childhood and her upbringing and my childhood, and started writing. Originally, I think I was going to write her story, just to kind of honor her and her sacrifices. And then I say about, I don't know, maybe the past 10 years, just journaling and just writing, I don't know, voice memos and all kinds of stuff. I just had writing in different places, right? And then about 3 years ago, I said, you know what, I really feel called to pull it all together into a book. And, as the title states, I never met my father. My mother and father didn't know each other well when I was born. They kind of went their separate ways. And I ended up never meeting him. But from a very young age, I always had a desire to know about him. And unlike a lot of children who grow up and their fathers and mothers live apart, I didn't have any connection with my father. I just had his first and last name, approximate age, the fact that he served in the military. That was about all the information my mother could share. So I literally, right after I graduated from Boston University, kind of started this journey that would take about 20 years of kind of trying to look for him. I've hired private investigators, obviously looked all over the internet, unsuccessfully. And it wasn't until 2020 that I took an ancestry DNA kit. And I don't want to give away the whole story, but I was able to reconnect with my father's side of the family for the first time. And it turns out he passed away in 2004. But I found out I have a half brother and a half sister on my dad's side. My uncle and aunt are still alive, and I'm very grateful that they're able to share stories about my father, pictures of him that are captured in the book. It was funny, both my aunt and uncle both read the book, and it was just, I don't know how to describe this experience. My father that I never met, his brother and his sister talking about their experience reading the book, and I'm describing their brother, right? And I'm describing the impact of his absence on my life. So, when I was a child, I don't know, I guess I felt like, woe is me type of situation. I probably didn't have the words to articulate it, but that was essentially the feeling. Felt, a lot of insecurity, a lot of vulnerability. Didn't really know what a masculinity looked like, what a father looked like. I have no brothers, no uncles. My grandfather died when I was very young. And so there was just not a lot of father figures in my life, particularly in my neighborhood. Really, all my friends' fathers weren't in the household with the exception of one. And so I was trying to figure it out. And like far too many young people in our generation and in this current generation as well. And so the book is really my attempt to try and lend some insight into the kind of the mindset of a fatherless child, to offer encouragement and hope to mothers raising children by themselves, but also the young people who and adults, quite frankly, who are wrestling, as Pia said, with father wounds. I saw a statistic that 9 out of 10 people in this country wrestle with some sort of father wound, whether your father was at home and you knew him your whole life, but you just didn't connect with him. I gave a talk this morning, and a gentleman said, a very successful brother in Boston and involved in philanthropy, and he said, my father was involved in my life my whole life. He said, but I didn't know he loved me until I was like 62 years old. He never told me that. And so anyway, the book is designed to be an encouragement to young people. I offer advice and encouragement to people who are not yet parents about some considerations for becoming parents. And then Tundi Kimpson, what's up, Tundi? Um, I, I'm also a father of four. And so I have this phrase that I call a fatherless lessons from a fatherless father. And so, I've had to learn how to become a father on the job, right? Through trial and error, because I really didn't have a whole lot of examples. And so now having a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 4-year-old, I've learned a lot of lessons, made a lot of mistakes, but always very kind of reflective of how myself not having my dad in my life has impacted me. And so I try to share all those lessons in the book. I try to be brutally honest, transparent. I share my struggles with my own mental health, wrestling with depression, all kinds of experiences. And so anyway, it's a privilege to share my story with you all. I'm an open book. And fortunately, I'm encouraged to hear from folks who have read the book that it really encouraged them. It's really been impactful in their lives. So I hope you guys get a chance to pick it up and read it. So yeah.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for being so vulnerable, both in the book and then even what you're sharing now. There's a segment toward the beginning of the book where you speak a little bit more about that transition from going to the schools in your community to going to Cambridge and Latin and the level of pressure that you were under, and then winding up going to the adolescent psych ward for a number of time. This sort of in that space, as you described it, sort of in that low point is when you got in touch with your Heavenly Father, or your Heavenly Father was always there, but where you were able to hear from him. Can you share a little bit with us about that? Because we have quite a few people here who practice as social workers and therapists in community. And then I'm sure among us that we all have had our breaking points and our experiences with trauma and our experiences with psychiatric units as well. And it's such a stigma around discussing it. And I felt like it was so liberating for you to share about it in the book, especially coming from a man and a Black man and your experience in Boston. So would you be willing to share a little bit more with everybody?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Like I said, when I was coming up in Boston, in Roxbury, I always say I grew up like across the street from where New Edition is from the Orchard Park projects. It was rough, late 80s, early 90s, crack epidemic, gangs. I've been robbed, I've been shot at, I've been jumped, my house been broken into multiple times. And adolescence is hard for everyone. It was particularly hard for me. The pressures of trying to navigate my own safety, issues at home. My sister was a teen mom, trying to help her. And then going to a rigorous academic high school, it became overwhelming for me. And so I did essentially have a breakdown in my teens. I spent time in the adolescent psych unit in Cambridge Hospital, and that was a really rough time for me. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I was at a very low point in my life. Fortunately, I had just met a wonderful young lady, and that encounter really changed my life. Her father was a pastor, and after I got out the hospital, her family really embraced me, and they're like the Cosbys, like the real life Cosbys. So I ended up marrying her. We've been together. Next year we'll be married 20 years. We've been together 30 years, since I was 15 and she was 14. But her father and mother were really extraordinary. They had 6 biological children, 1 adopted son, and they fostered dozens of children over the years. So literally when I met my wife, between her 6 siblings, and then the 6 siblings that they were fostering all the son at the same time, there were 13 children in that household. So anyway, they were really, and I talk about this in the book, the first example of an intact, healthy, strong Black family that I was able to observe firsthand. And in many ways, I've modeled my view of a father and a mother and a husband and a wife after my in-laws, which are extraordinary people. So, but all that to say, I think it's important to be vulnerable about, our challenges. I think sometimes we're tempted to kind of put on, that we have it all together. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think in our vulnerability, there's strength. And I think when we are open and honest, transparent about what we've gone through, we give permission for other people to be open and honest as well. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my story. And my hope is that it encourages folks. And I think statistically, raise of children who grow up without their fathers, like there's a lot of data, a lot of research. The science is pretty clear that children have poorer life outcomes, educational outcomes, behavioral outcomes, more criminal involvement, early teen pregnancy, all those things. And so I hope that my book kind of demonstrates that that's not a definite, right? That no matter how you grew up or what you've been through, that, there's hope. And so, yeah. So one of the taglines on my book is from the poorhouse to the White House. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And then throughout especially in the early chapters, you talk a lot about your experience growing up with your mom and with your sister, and how nurturing your sister in particular was to you, in ways that your mom wasn't really able, just recognizing and acknowledging the levels of trauma that she had already experienced in her life before you were even born, and the loss that she experienced. And you said I didn't really like being home in the chaos. So I purposely spent a lot of time out of the house and slept over friends' houses 3 to 4 times per week. And I think that's an experience that a lot of people can relate to. And again, it's something we don't speak about. And whether it's for our own lives or those of people that we're supporting, whether it be in therapy setting, in the classroom, in the community. And sometimes there's like this unknown piece that's happening with people, and we don't know how to support them in that journey. So as you reflect back at that time of being a teenager, or even being a young boy really, and going through that, what were some of the ways that other adults may have been able to support you better, I guess? And if there were ones that did support you in a way that was fruitful for you?
Yeah, I want to say, a lot of my friends' mothers were really extraordinary. They took me in essentially. So I nowadays, when I see my friends' mothers, I'm just so grateful for them, and I apologize for eating all their food. But yeah, that saying about it takes a village. Like, I really felt like, I don't know if some kind of created a village, or the parents in my community were just like, we need to come around Eugene. This young man needs some help. But I did feel like I had a support network. It was mostly my friends' mothers. And I just have to shout out just mothers in general. Like, my book is very much, even though the title's I Never Met My Father, is very much affirming of the critical and important role that mothers play. So yeah, my mom, God bless her, she's 80 years old. She lives with us part-time, and she spent most of her adult career, 30 plus years, as an educator in Boston. So just to see the sacrifices that she made is just incredible. And so I have nothing but the highest regard for mothers and what they do. And the wonderful thing about when fathers are positively engaged in the lives of their children, their moms don't have to do it all by themselves. So I'm a big advocate. But yeah, so in terms of supports, I felt like as a young man, I didn't see a lot of men in my community. And I used to ask myself this question, like, where are all the men? I just had this sense intuitively that men are supposed to protect their communities. And I just didn't see that growing up. I just felt really vulnerable, and so I made this commitment to myself as a young man. When I grow up and I become a man, and I didn't know what that meant. I don't know what it meant to be a man yet. That I wouldn't let the generation that comes after me say what I was saying about the generation before me. Where are they? How come they're not doing more to protect us? And so you know, I made that commitment, and I like to say that, you know, those who I surround myself with are working to fulfill that commitment. You know, that hope prayerfully the generation that comes after us will feel like there's more support and encouragement, particularly from the men in their communities.
You were very candid also about just giving a context for who you were, I guess, as a preteen into adolescence, and by not having your own father or even male figures or even fathers of other friends, you mentioned there weren't really other fathers to your friends as well, that you kind of had to construct this message of what a man would be, and you kind of pieced that together, whether it was from music and from other exposures that weren't necessarily positive. And then you told the story also about you know, your love of Lawrence Taylor and even imagining yourself with the jersey. Can you share with the audience more about that journey and that Lawrence Taylor story as well?
Yeah. So, you know, as a child, I love sports like a lot of children do. I pictured myself playing professional football. Like, I just knew you couldn't tell me I wasn't gonna play professional football, even though I've never played organized football in my life. So go figure. But you know, I remember watching the Giants. I know there's some New Yorkers on, who to New York because I'm a Boston fan. But anyway, so I digress. But at the time, I was rocking with the Giants, and Lawrence Taylor, if you don't know who that is the most dominant defensive player in the history of the NFL, linebacker for the New York Giants. And I used to watch him as like a 7, 8-year-old boy, and just like, man, when I grow up, I want to be like that. I want to play in the league. And I just had this vision, like, when I grow up, I'm gonna play in the league, and I'm gonna have my jersey. I was gonna wear number 56 like he wore it, and it was on the back of my jersey. It was gonna say Schneeberg. And then the fantasy continues that I be in like the stadium, and the game's over, and I'm walking to the tunnel, and this man will come over to me, and he would say, "Hey, you know, can I talk to you for a minute?" And I'd be like, "What's up?" And he said, "Hey, man, I'm your father." And this is all in my dreams, you know. And I remember thinking, like, I'm gonna have the joy of being able to kind of tell him off, curse him out for abandoning me and all this other stuff. And you know, I'm just making up the story in my head. And then I remember sharing it inside a juvenile detention facility. And I, you know, at the end, when I shared the story, I said, "How many of you guys have had a similar thought, and almost every hand went up." And at that point, I just had, and I was in my early 20s, then I said, "Man, I'm not the only one." And I just feel like there's a lot of young men who do emulate to be in the league, to have a certain level of significance, so that at some point they can kind of prove their worth to their fathers. And as I've reflected over these 20 years about my father's absence, I've realized that a lot of what I've done subconsciously was to kind of prove that I have value, to prove that I have worth, to prove that I was good enough, to prove that I was worthy to be loved. And fortunately, in some ways, I've been relieved from that burden. But I think it's something that a lot of children who grow up without their fathers kind of wrestle to kind of seek after the love and affirmation of their fathers that they never got.
Thank you. No, hearing that, I feel like that resonates with so many people, even, I mean, you're speaking from the experience as an adolescent boy, but I'm sure that a lot of girls also can relate to similar ideas and creating this whole story in your mind. So again, the way you were able to share it in the book, so vulnerably and so detailed, is so liberating to be able to see and hear that someone else has the type of thoughts. And when you shared about going to the juvenile detention center and the young people saying that they felt something similar. So not only do you give those stories of your own experience, but then in the call to action, it's about how you began your journey of healing from this. So can you speak a little bit more about what that has been like for you, going to these detention centers and literally meeting people where they're at, especially boys and men, and hearing from you? What has that been like for you?
Yeah, so, you know, since there's a lot of BU folks on, when I went to BU, and y'all know this, like we had a pretty distinguished graduated class, right? You know, we had some smart folks in our group. And so come around 1999, 2000, people are graduating, they're going on to get these, you know, great jobs. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna give me a great job too. But I wasn't as smart or savvy as a lot of my classmates. So when I went to get that first job at a college at 21, the opportunities wasn't there. I didn't have my stuff together enough to go to grad school. So my mom was like, hey, she was teaching at that time inside a juvenile detention facility. And she said, you know, I can't help you get a job here. And I was like, I don't want my mom to help me get my first job out of college. I got a degree. I'm, you know, this and that, young, dumb, prideful. And so when I didn't get that dream job with the city of Boston, with the mayor's office that I thought I should have got, I came back to my mother with my kind of tail between my legs. And I said, Mom, what's up with that job? And she helped me get a job at a juvenile detention facility. Honestly, if I'm being really real, I thought to myself, do I really want to work with these quote unquote bad kids? Because as I said earlier, you know, I have all the stuff I've been through, robbed, jumped, shot at, all kinds of stuff. And so, man, I want to be confined with these bad kids. My first day on the job, all those misconstrued, preconceived notions went out the window when I met some extraordinary young people, young men that would just had tremendous potential, just have made a bad decision like we all have. And it totally changed my life. It totally changed my career trajectory. And I've been working with young people involved in the juvenile justice system and subsequently adults in the adult criminal justice system for the past 20 plus years. And one thing about working with people who do come in contact with our justice system, it'll teach you a lot about yourself if you're willing to learn, right? And so I've learned so much from young people. I've learned so much from adults, and it's been just a privilege to be able to serve inside facilities. I still do. I still go inside facilities. It's graduated to working with people in recovery from drugs and alcohol. And it's just, like I said, it's an honor to serve and to see this theme among many people who do come in contact with the criminal justice system of broken relationships with their fathers. And so, again, my goal, hope, and desire is to increase the number of children that are raised by loving fathers and mothers. And that's really the mission I'm on. And my hope is that the book helps to contribute to that.
Wow, thank you. I didn't know that's how you came upon that piece of the journey. Because I feel like I remembered you talking a lot in college about serving community and doing a lot of extracurricular things, as we all did on the weekends with SPES and all these enrichment programs for young people in the community. So I didn't realize that going into the detention centers wasn't an initial desire of yours.
I was trying to get paid.
I should have had that idea, but I did not. So that actually ties right into something that you said in the book. You said, throughout history, military strategies have been based on the warring factions' ability to kill off or remove the men from the women and children. So when you're speaking about going into these detention centers with boys, essentially, not even men necessarily, and we know how many of our men in particular have been impacted by incarceration, and how many of us right here have been impacted by the carceral system, if not by our own experience being incarcerated, then someone we love, or many people that we love, people in community. So can you speak a little bit more to sort of that juxtaposition of this way of taking away our people through war and incarceration as its intersection, and how you've been able to really be in the midst of that healing, literally on the inside, and guiding people into community and preventing reentry?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, if you look at kind of family demographics, if you look at kind of like the history of mass incarceration in our country, like most children were raised in two-parent households till about 1960. And then in 1960, you see this dramatic decrease in the number of children raised by both parents. And at the same time, you see this really exponential growth in our prison population. And I firmly believe that the two kind of charts are correlate, and kind of peaking in the mid 90s, kind of with crack epidemic and so forth. And so there's an entire generation of young people whose parents, whose fathers were incarcerated, or mothers for that matter. And fortunately, I think over the past probably 20 years, there's been a growing recognition that we need to do better when it comes to like criminal justice reform. You know, Michelle Alexander's book on the new Jim Crow was a groundbreaking and changed the game. So I think probably somewhere around like maybe the mid 2010s ish, we saw for the first time in 40 years prison population declining for the very first time in like 40 years. When I was at the Justice Department, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which is, you know, the federal prison system, had 216,000 people in it, 99% men. I just looked at a statistic this week, it's 160,000. So there's probably about 25% drop over the past 8 years, which is pretty significant. But you're also seeing, you know, statistics from the census, 2020 census, that there's 2 million more children raised in households with dads present than there was in 2010. So I'm optimistic and encouraged by, you know, the trends that we are incarcerating less fathers, and we are, and also that there are more fathers in the home. So yeah. So I forget your question, Pia, but I hope I answered it.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah. And you're speaking to fatherhood and that vulnerability, and we have a lot of fathers represented here. So you mentioned in the book, which I think a lot of us have seen Antoine Fisher and probably cried and sobbed uncontrollably, but you spoke about your experience watching the movie and sobbing uncontrollably, but not stopping yourself, and that your daughter saw you. And I guess you kind of thought about stopping, but then you said, no, this is important for her to be able to see and experience me in this moment. Can you share more about that process of being a father and allowing that vulnerability to be present, even being able to cry, because so many people can't even get in touch with their tears because they really was taken away from them over.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So for those of you, I know most of you guys are on mute, but I'm gonna answer your question like this. So I'm gonna say a sentence, and then I want you to basically finish the sentence for me, okay?
So we can take the mute off. You want to take the mute off?
Yeah, everybody take your phone off mute real quick. Okay. All right, so here goes the sentence. So let's find that mute button. All right. Y'all ready? All right. Boys don't, finish the sentence. Boys don't
cry.
Right.
Boys don't cry. Okay. So my question to you all is, how can we all know that statement? And is it a true statement? That's the first thing. Second thing is, I've learned over the years that a lot of times in our society, we program boys through statements like that. Don't act like a baby. Don't act like a punk. Don't act like a sissy. Don't act like a wimp, right? We tell boys if they're sad or they're afraid, that somehow those two emotions equate with weakness or lack of masculinity. Neither of which is true, but we send these messages to boys when they're very young. And so I internalize those messages like probably many of you who are on today. And so when I think about the impact that has on men, is that when we do experience feelings of sadness, we oftentimes suppress those feelings, and oftentimes are unable to kind of articulate or communicate or even be in touch with them. Same thing with fear, or you know, we always get these messages like, don't be scared, don't be soft, don't be a punk, don't act like a girl. And so when you bring up Antoine Fisher, Antoine Fisher's story is just so powerful and emotional. Anyway, so I've learned over the years that it's okay, it's healthy and necessary to cry as a man. But when I was younger, I didn't really realize that. So I kind of thought it was like a sign of weakness. And so what I find myself doing oftentimes is I cry in movie theaters. You know, it's dark, there's a sense of anonymity. And I cry over every movie. Like it could be like Finding Nemo, I'm crying. It's because I have so much bottled up emotion. And so anytime I see like raw emotion of any kind, even if it's like happiness or whatever. So I'm sitting in my living room, I'm watching Antoine Fisher by myself, and I'm not crying, I'm leaking. Like my whole shirt is wet with tears. And my daughter came home from school or something. And ordinarily I would kind of like do one of these, like try and play it off, like, oh, I got something in my eye. But I just thought to myself, it's really important in this moment that I allow my daughter to see her father express emotion, his emotions, and express sadness, and then be able, and I knew because she's wired like that, she would ask me like, "What's wrong, Daddy?" And I would be able to tell her like, "Daddy's sad," you know, or whatever. And I just feel like as a father, it's really important that I model the kind of full range of my emotions. I teach my sons and my daughter that it's okay to express your emotions, and that it's healthy, and that it's not a sign of weakness, that it's actually a sign of strength. And so I'm big on helping other men and other fathers and young men to understand that. And so we actually, Pia, we run groups. My company, Fathers Forward, we run groups in 12 counties throughout the state of Maryland, and some in Virginia as well, where we really help fathers by creating a safe space for them to unpack, to vent, to share, to process, and to receive encouragement and support from one another.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because we got some people in your area there that may want to participate in the Fathers Forward group. So that's something we'll definitely make sure that we get people information so that they can participate if they want to. And then as you're talking about even Genesis being able to see you and experience you in the sorrow, which you explained was bottled up. And so it just had to come out. But even in general, throughout the book, you give so much insight and knowledge and wisdom around fatherhood and how to be a great father, as you said, even though you didn't have one. So can you share a little bit more just with the audience here, especially because as I mentioned, there's a lot of fathers here. What are some of the key things that you feel like you've been able to just acquire wisdom about fatherhood?
Yeah.
And have been, impressionable with your family and your children?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things for me in my own growth and development, and I encourage other fathers and mothers for that matter, is to one, being able to reflect on the impact that your own father and your own mother had on your life. I think it's really important that we spend time being intentional about that. And for those of you who might be like me, who harbored, resentment, unforgiveness, whatever emotion you may have, for me personally, I really believe in the power of forgiveness. And so I talk about in the book, forgiving your father and forgiving yourself. For me, that was really liberating to be able to release my father, release my mother from any hard feelings that I had. I had to realize that I didn't fully understand the story. I didn't fully understand all the context of what happened between my mother and my father. And quite frankly, my mother's role as a gatekeeper. My mother actually, when my father found out that I had been born, my mother essentially told him, I'm okay. I really don't need any assistance from you. I'll be okay. I can raise my daughter and my son by myself. And she kind of said, thanks, but no thanks. So I think forgiveness is key. I think having a support network is really critical. So I have a lot of solid brothers that I keep around me. Every Tuesday morning for the past like 5 years, I get together with 4 other fathers and husbands, and we share um, how things are going in our marriages, with our children. We're open, honest, vulnerable with one another. And I'm able to be really, really open and honest with them. And then in addition to the groups that I'm a part of and running for other dads. And so I think your support network is really critical as well. And then, faith is a very important part of my life. And so I talk about it in the book, how, understanding that I'm loved by God, that God is my father, that he loves me unconditionally was huge in my healing. So yeah, it's a little bit about that, Pia.
And one of the things that, I'm not a father, but I'm a mom, that convicted me, as you said, however, there's a fine line between having high expectations and being overly critical, and I've been both. So I feel like that statement is so powerful in parenting, and I'm sure in fatherhood. And even when you were sharing about your experience being raised in Roxbury, but then commuting all the way to Cambridge to go to school, and then we met you, many of us met you at BU. So knowing sort of this push and this rigor that's always kind of threaded throughout, and then raising your own children now. Can you speak a little bit about how you even balance that tension?
Yeah. I think that in the self-reflection I've been doing these past 20 years, I think I realized I was grinding. Like, I was always trying to work harder, do better, make more money, just work, to almost workaholic tendencies. And then when I became a dad, I think I kind of unconsciously passed a lot of those expectations on my kids. Like, you need to grind, you always work hard, you know what I mean? And then to the point where I used to be like, if you come home with like a B plus on your report card, I would say, well, why is it not an A? Instead of celebrating a B plus, I would be critical. Or if they were playing basketball and they scored 12 points, I would say, oh, you could have scored 15 if you would have did ABC. And I found myself doing that over and over again. And then as I stepped back and realized, like, man, where's this coming from? And I realized that I believe that I was working so hard to prove to this father that I had never met that I was worthy of love, that I was valuable. And if I worked so hard and accomplished all these things, that somehow I would prove to him that, all happening subconsciously, that I was worth it. And so I was passing that on to my children unknowingly. I was telling them, my love for you is based on how hard you work and your accomplishments and so forth. So when I realized that, I was able to kind of put the brakes on it and really be able to express kind of my unconditional love for them, regardless of whether they perform or don't perform, right? So now if they come home with like a C plus, I'm like, all right, that's good. I bite my tongue, you know what I mean? And I try and step back and just be a cheerleader. And so that's been liberating for me. And I think it's strengthened my relationship with my children.
What's pretty cool too is in the book, you talk about, as you mentioned earlier in the talk, really meeting God in that particular moment when you're, I guess, like 17, 18 years old. So many of us met you, I guess, right on the cusp of that moment. And so now, reflecting back, that was evident just in the way you carried yourself and the way you were distinguished from amongst your peers. So thinking about this moment now in your ministry, through all of your work in the community, in the country, with your children, your direct children, with this group that you meet with on Tuesdays, how do you integrate your ministry in a way that people can receive it without feeling that you are, I guess, being too aggressive with it? Because that's like a fine balance, especially when you're working with young people. And I feel like you have this ability to strike that balance where it doesn't feel like the Bible thumping style, but it's testimonial in a way that can be received. Can you share a little bit about, what your process is even in doing that?
Yeah, thank you. Wow, great. You're a very good interviewer, by the way, Pia. No, I I feel very fortunate that I've been going into juvenile detention facilities for over 20 years. And so not going in to preach to kids, not going over into to judge them or whatever, but just really to be present with them and really listen. I found that that's like a effective way to serve people is be a generous listener. And so, and then also be vulnerable. I think some people um give off the sense that like I got it all together, as I said earlier, you know what I mean? You need to kind of be like me or whatever, you know, but I go in there and I try and be very vulnerable that I don't have it all together. I got plenty of issues. But that even with your all your issues that you're still loved and there's still hope and just being present. And so um and I and I'm taking a posture of learning, right? So I'm learning from everybody that I encounter. I'm learning from them. I'm not there to fix them. I can't even fix myself. And so I'm trying to learn, trying to listen and offer some encouragement, even as I'm encouraged. So yeah.
Oh, and you're indeed doing that too. I love that generous listener. That's definitely who you are, what you embody. And I love that you even shared at the early part of the book that you were born in Boston during the blizzard of '77 and you were conceived during the miniseries Roots. And just thinking about that context of time and the miniseries and what that has meant, that miniseries alone for not just our generation, probably about 2 to 3 generations. And just sort of those famous moments of identity being attempted to be stripped and robbed from a human being, an African human being that represents so many of us here. And that was the time that you were conceived and that you have this more than 20-year journey of looking toward finding your earthly father, thinking about what his name was and if it was a common name or not, and if you carried that name or not. So it's just such a parallel between this attempt to kind of rob you of an earthly identity, and in some ways, maybe even purpose to do that, so that you're not attached to a name or a person or a bloodline on earth, but really to what your purpose is and what God has put you on this earth to do. And so that purpose permeates everything that you do, regardless of what your name is, regardless of if you ever got the Schneeberg on the back of the jersey or any of that. So I just feel like that parallel for your life and how you were conceived is really representative in a lot of ways of who you are and who you're continuing to be revealed and become. So I'm really honored to hear what you have to say, but I want to hear from everybody else. I know I've been asking a lot of questions because I've had a lot, but I want to give time. Certainly, I know people have lots of questions and comments, so please unmute yourselves. And yeah, let's hear more from Eugene through your lenses and through your voices. So I'm opening the floor.
Hey, good evening. My name is Kevin. Thank you for your for sharing. I want to ask you a question about something you said a little while ago, if that's okay. In regards to you were talking about, I think when you left college and you didn't want to work with these bad kids, and then you said like you saw something in them. I'm just curious, like after walking in with that, having that thought, like what was the thing that you saw? Like I'm curious, what did you see in these kids that made you change your mind at that moment? I just feel like that would be a helpful thing to kind of think about for folks.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. That's a great question. So yeah, I think sometimes, you know, our perception of people is oftentimes so informed by like media and some of our own personal experiences. And so I definitely went into working at that facility with all these preconceived notions. But when I actually met the young people, the young men, these weren't like thugs and hardened killers. They were like 14-year-old boys who, like I said, made some mistakes. And I really saw a lot of myself in them. I could have easily been there for the stupid stuff I did as a teenager. I mean, we all did stupid. I know Tundi did a lot of stupid stuff as a teenager in Rhode Island. So anyway, Rob too. So I remember this one young man, Clifford Lawrence, my first day on the job. I walk in. So when you work for in any correctional setting, you go through mandatory training. You learn how to restrain someone. You learn how to put handcuffs on them. You learn all this other stuff. You learn how not to be taken advantage of. It's very kind of like strict training. So I went in there 21 years old, 22 years old, thinking like, I'm not going to let any of these dudes punk me. That's what I want to like, you know what I mean? I'm going to go in there, I'm going to assert my manhood. And so that's the kind of mindset I went into. And then first day I went in, this little boy is like 14, 15 years old, like 110 pounds. And he was sitting on the floor. They had stripped these boys of all their privileges, the TV, the furniture, their shoes. I mean, they were literally sitting on the floor with like t-shirts over their head. And that was one of the behavior modification techniques that they used. If they would act it up, they lost as many privileges as they could strip down. So the little boy looks up to me, Clifford, and he says, "Are you a new staff?" And I remember I had been trained. So I said, "Yeah, I'm a new staff. Yeah, you're not going to take advantage of me." And he says, "Do you know what my problem is?" I said, "Nah, what's up?" And he said, I have low self-esteem." And then he went on to tell me like this diagnosis that he had received. It's like 15, like very articulately, very charismatically. And it just dawned on me like, man, like this is an extraordinary young man with tremendous potential. And I had just kind of wrapped up my time at BU, and I thought, how many young people that are much smarter than I was at 15 just never had the opportunity to go to college. I kind of made up in my mind, like if I can encourage them and kind of get them on the right track, they can probably end up in college like I did and so forth. So I got to know Clifford over the year that he was there or so. And it changed my life, and I fell in love with the work. And if you ever get the privilege of going into any correctional facility or any treatment facility, it will change your life. You'll probably fall in love. You'll probably get hooked because there's such a sense of genuineness there, such a sense of humility and appreciation. It's nothing like you see on TV. It's not Oz. It's not whatever them stupid shows they have on TV, 60 Days In and all that other stuff. That's glamorized and scripted and some other stuff. Like most people who end up in correctional settings are just like you and I. They just made some mistakes. They're genuine, caring people, and very appreciative. If you ever have the opportunity to go in and serve and volunteer, it's the best thing in the world.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd love to field any other questions. Is that you, Jennifer?
Hi. First of all, I love the whole conversation. Thank you so much. And all the things you've had to say about masculinity and vulnerability and crying. And my question is about this, I guess, like commitment you made when you decided to become a dad, to kind of teach yourself a new way, or it's not even a new way, because unlike people who maybe had traumatic relationships with their dads, you're teaching yourself a path without having these other paradigms to like overcome exactly, but you also didn't have these examples. So, and I know you cited your in-laws, and that was really kind of lovely to hear also, but I'm just wondering, like, how did you approach, you seem so deliberate about the way you're parenting, which is also very inspiring. So I would just love to hear a little bit more about how you approached putting into place like the kind of dad that you have become, or was it more of a process?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. That's a great question. It's definitely a process. And let me just tell you, I miss it all the time. I miss it every day as a dad. Like I yell at my kids, I overreact, I say something slick to their mother. I realize there are no perfect fathers, just like there are no perfect mothers. But that being said, there's a saying that I often say, which is, your greatest pain is your greatest gift. And so for me, as I think back over my life, my greatest pain is not knowing my father. And what that's actually, although it was painful and hard, continues to be hard, it actually turned into a gift. It actually gave me clarity about my purpose. It led to an amazing career trajectory where I got to work for the President of the United States on his fatherhood initiative. And I think it also has translated to be a gift for my children. Now, if you ask them, they may tell you something different, but I definitely intentional is a good word, Jennifer. I'm very intentional that I want to give my children what I didn't have. So I want to hug my kids as often as possible. I'm not make it look like I hug them every single day all the time, but I am a hugger, right? I want to tell them I love them as often as I can, that I'm proud of them. I want to affirm them. When they were little, I want to do things that I never had. I want to pick them up. I want to play with them and roughhouse with them. Things that I wish I had. So I'm very clear on what I didn't have, and that I want my children to have what I didn't have. And I've met so many fathers who feel the same way and who are kind of doing that very same thing. They've learned how to father by what they didn't have, unfortunately. And I really feel like there's a generational shift where you're seeing a lot of young men and older men who didn't have their fathers or didn't have great relationships with their fathers that are committed to kind of break that cycle. Conversely, let me just say this. I often hear from men and women who say, my father was in my life, but we had a lousy relationship. And they have to kind of wrestle with that, which is very interesting. One of my good friends, and I quote him in the book, when I was in my mid-20s, he said to me, Gene, you know what? It's better to have no father than a bad father. And I was like, what did you just say? It just rocked me because I had never thought about it that way. I always thought, no, like, I'm the one missing out. But I didn't really take into consideration that the adverse effect that having a dad in your life could have if it was a rocky relationship, and unfortunately, I do a program, a father's group inside of kind of a halfway home, a drug treatment facility. And we went around and the whole hour-long session was, what was your relationship like with your father? And almost without exception, they all went around and said, my father was an alcoholic, my father was on drugs, or my father died when I was very young. Almost every single man in that room. And then all of them have themselves become addicts in some way, shape, or form, and all of them have done time. And just to see that kind of generational cycle. But I'm also encouraged that each of them said, I want to break that for my children. I want to do different. I want to do better. And I think that's the sentiment that a lot of fathers have. Other questions? Do we have time?
Yeah.
I would love to hear other questions.
Yeah,
I have a lot of questions. I'm very grateful for you sharing your story. My mother did the same thing though. I used to bring home tests, and I remember one time I brought her a test, it was 105, and she would be like, it's not enough. She would tell me like, you could have did better. I'm like, it's 105. Like I even got extra credit on the test. Like, what more did you want me to do? Like, but I see as an adult, like it's definitely instilled this like feeling of me not being enough. Like, like, and I overcompensate. Like I notice I do that. Like, it's very interesting. But I think also working with youth, like you do learn a lot about yourself because the way they process and understand stuff for themselves, like like they just watching them understand it for themselves is very different. But my question is, I do follow this movement of like fatherhood because I also have never met my dad. But like Kier Gaines and Deval Ellis, I know they're like trying to change the narrative as well. Is there like a group? I don't want to say like a group, or do you allow like women to be invited into these spaces, or like do you guys 'cause I think it's very interesting because we don't really talk about it as from the male perspective of a dad being a father, like or like a male being a father, but like is there like resources for that?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry, your question was, I think, I don't want to paraphrase, do we allow women to be part of the movement? Was that what you asked?
Yeah, or are there resources for women to be part of?
Yeah. So first of all, we don't have to allow women to do anything because y'all don't need permission to do anything. I'm smart enough to know that, right? I don't know everything, but I know that. Absolutely, women, there would be no fatherhood movement without women, right? Women are championing the issue of of fatherhood all around the country. They're running programs, they're funding, they're reforming policy, they're being vocal, they're convening conversations like this, they're attending and participating. So you don't need permission, my permission at all. There's, and I loved what you said. You named a couple brothers, but yeah, there's a movement. And shout out to Tundi if you gotta go. But there's a movement that's been around for about 20 years, changing the narrative. If you think about like TV, like when we were coming up, like the father figures by and large were like dunces, like Al Bundy and Homer Simpson. They were the butt of jokes and all of that, you know. They were viewed as incompetent, you know, incapable caregivers. I think nowadays you see more nuanced characters like This Is Us, and you know, fathers being seen as more of as nurturers. So, but to your point, there are a lot of great websites. So our website is fathersforward.com. The book website is IneverMetMyFather.com. I work on the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, which is fatherhood.gov. There's the National Fatherhood Initiative, which is fatherhood.org. That has a ton of great information. So, and what the sister that just asked that question, what part of the country do you live in?
I'm in New York.
Okay, yeah. So there's a ton of great fatherhood work being done in New York. The city has a fatherhood initiative. It's headed up by a brother named Scott Leach. There's fatherhood work being done in each of the boroughs. There's an extraordinary organization called Fathers Alive in the Hood. FAITH is the acronym, Fathers Alive in the Hood. They have a great Facebook page. They do great work in each of the boroughs. So there's Westchester County has an annual fatherhood conference. There's an annual New York Fatherhood Conference. So there's definitely opportunities to get involved. There's tons of resources and we need it, right? The need is so big to bring healing and wholeness and restoration that we all have a part to play, whether we're mothers or fathers or daughters or sons or uncles and aunties, or teachers or philanthropists, or whatever our role is, mentors. We all have a role, I think, in helping children to feel healthy, whole, and be able to deal with the issues. I also want to say that although historically there's been a really, terrible wave of fatherlessness, I'm seeing a significant increase in what I'll call absent mothers, particularly due to substance abuse. I hear from fathers all the time that the mother of their children is no longer involved in their children's life because of by and large drug abuse. And so yeah, it's not that fathers are somehow more important than mothers or mothers are somehow more important than fathers. It's that mothers and fathers are both equally important lives of their children. And then I just do want to say that in the book, I'm sure Pia will get to that, but at the end of every chapter, there's a fatherhood challenge, both for men and women, things that they can do to encourage fatherless children or to strengthen their own families. Yeah. Other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank
and
you.
I did have one more question. Have you reached out to your father?
Yes. So you got to read chapter 9 of the book. Okay. So what's the name of the chapter 9? Okay, hold on. Let me find it. I should know this by now. No, I can't. I can't give it away. Yes, I have reached out to my father. So I spent 20 years looking for him. And I was able to track down his side of the family. So, but I don't want to give away the whole book. You got to read it yourself. You got to check it out, pick it up. I never met my father.com, but yeah. One of the biggest questions I had, and this is like a freebie. You can go to I never met my father.com and read a sample chapter. But I always wanted to know what my father looked like. I mean, that seems like pretty simple, right? Like, I think I always wanted, I didn't have any photos of him. So I always want to know, did I look like him? Did I resemble him? Did I have his mannerisms or anything like that? What did I get from him? I knew what I kind of got from my mother, like her quirkiness and her love for education and all that other stuff. And but I want to know. So I don't want to give it away, but I now know if I resemble my father. Now I got pictures of my father in the book and stuff like that. Yeah. So Jamila has a question. She has a hand raised. Hey, Jamila.
Hi, I know I got in a little late, but I was really curious about how I might be giving some stuff away, but I was curious to see how you felt. Did you change in any way after you met your father? Because I noticed that with my husband before we got married, I just felt this urge to push him a lot to meet his dad. Even though there wasn't really a relationship before we got married, because I just felt that once we had kids, it would just be it would just impact him in unspoken ways. And I was curious with you, like, even though you've done a lot of positive things up until that point, did you feel like something shifted with you when you had that moment of meeting him?
Yeah, definitely. And Pia, if my phone dies, I'm gonna dial right back in. So because I got the 10% warning, so my bad. But yes. So for one, Jamila, I still have never met my father. You got to read the book to figure it all out, right? But I have learned a lot more about him and about his side of the family. I'll say that. And when I did, it definitely something shifted, something unlocked in me that I have been holding for 40 years. I had a greater sense of peace. I mean, it's hard for me to describe the weight. It's almost like, I don't know what the term I'm trying to the emotional energy that it took to be constantly thinking about not knowing my father. Like, where is he? What happened? Is he dead or alive? Is he thinking about me? Do I have siblings? Did he remarry? Like, where is this dude? You know what I'm saying? Like, that never went away. Like, I was constantly reminded of his absence. And so it just weighed on me. It was a heavy weight for years and years and years. And I think that weight, you know, Jamila, you probably talked to your husband about it, but consciously or unconsciously, it was very heavy. So to find out finally, after all these years, information that I've been searching for, finally, because it was the not knowing was the hardest part. Like, I didn't know would I ever meet him. I didn't know would I ever meet his side of the family. Would I ever find out, do I have siblings? I didn't know. I thought maybe I'll go my whole life and never know, right? And so to have that chapter in my life, have some closure, was huge. And I do feel like the weight's been lifted. I feel like it's been great. And it's been huge. I don't know how to describe it. It's like hitting the lottery or something. It's a game changer to be on the phone. Like, the first time I talked to, so my father's last name is Graham. My mother's, if you can't tell by my last name, Schneeberg, my mother's Jewish, she's white, my father's black. So having never met any family members on my father's side, no one. The first time I actually talked to a Graham on my father's side, 2020, like, it was a surreal experience. I'm on the phone, my hand is shaking. I'm talking to my first cousin, and I'm like, wow, like, I'm actually on the phone with my first cousin, and he's talking about his aunt and his uncle, who's my father. It was amazing. It was unbelievable. So, and to have my wife, Jamila, shout out to you and shout out to your husband, have my wife by my side all these years to kind of see my issues and my drama and put up with my stuff, but also to encourage me on my journey. And like, I remember when I got the results from Ancestry. I don't know if anybody's ever done Ancestry.com, the DNA test, or 23andMe or whatever. But like, literally, when I got the results, like, I'm like, babe, I got the results. She's like, hold on, don't look at them yet, you know? And we're looking at them together. And like, if I was by myself, it would be like all these like fear and trepidation and anxiety, but like, she was with me, she had me, you know? So shout out to my wife. She's been that that strong force in my life since I was a little boy, since I was 15. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah. And let me just say this. Fatherless children, or at least this was my experience. You know, when you're a little kid and you do a family tree in school. For me, I only had half a tree, and there was shame and stigma associated with that. Like, who wants half a tree? You're doing your family tree. Everybody else, oh, my family's from Italy and Ireland and Nigeria or wherever. I'm like, I got half a tree. That's all I got. And so then when I had kids, my kids only had 3/4 of a tree. They got my wife's both sides of her family all intact and detailed and branches and stuff. And they got my mother's side of the family, but they only had, and they would ask me questions. Where's your father, daddy? Where's your father? Do you know is your father alive? And when they were from the little kids, and I would tell them in age appropriate ways, no, daddy doesn't know his father, you know? And then in 2020, to be able to tell them, daddy, this is your grandfather. This is a picture of your grandfather. You know, this is daddy's aunt. It blew them away, and to have them cheer me along the way, you know, because I'm open and honest with them as well. So it's pretty cool. I haven't met them in person because of COVID. It's been difficult, but I'm looking forward to that. And if you've ever seen Antoine Fisher, I put this in the book. There's a scene at the end. If you don't take anything away from this time, just go watch Antoine Fisher, because it's that good of a movie. But I don't give away a movie, but I'll just say there's a scene with pancakes. They had this huge family dinner with the elders, and his favorite food is pancakes. And when I talked to my family members, I said, when we get together, I'm definitely having pancakes. I'm waiting for my Antoine Fisher moment. Yeah. So, yep. Other questions, thoughts, reflections? Yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys.
You could just unmute yourselves.
I have a couple. I don't have a fully formed thought, so let me start with that.
You good?
But first of all, I learned more about you in this time together than in the 4 years at BU. And I'm so thankful to learn more about you and hear your story, and I look forward to reading the book. My father he worked in a juvenile correction facility in New Jersey. And he often would, on the weekends, say if it was a holiday week, Memorial Day weekend or something, he would go to work and then come back with like a van full of like 16-year-old boys, which I loved, right? But it also helped me to learn really early, though, that what you said about the humanity and the experiences and the often poor decisions that people make that land them in those types of situations. So I think I'm just thinking about that and the need for compassion. I'm curious about your feelings about incarceration, right? And how we criminalize behaviors in a way that leaves so many without fathers, without brothers, without their loved ones. I'm curious about your thoughts. I feel like it's also my experience with my dad also made me, I call myself the president of the Second Chance Club, because I think most of my serious relationships have been with men that have had legal system involvement or have a history of incarceration. So I've been in a lot of facilities and written a lot of letters and done that type of thing, and have been through that system myself. So I'm curious about your thoughts about incarceration and how do we get ourselves out of this situation
And I'm sorry I took myself off video because I don't want my phone to die, so I gotta just plug it in. So yes, No, I love the story about your father. And I've heard different instances of other fathers who've worked in as correctional officers and stuff like that, and how it's impacted their children's lives. Yeah, we definitely incarcerate too many people in this country. The United States incarcerates more people than any other country in the world. We use our criminal justice system and our prisons and jails as mental health facilities, but with no mental health professionals there. They just house people with mental illness, and it traumatizes people. And so, yeah, I think, but the good news is I think there's a growing awareness of that. And there's a growing number of kind of legislators and policymakers that are like our generation, right? Who are in positions to impact that. Like there's a young woman, Liz Miranda, I don't know if you guys know Liz, but she went to Wellesley at the same time we were at BU, but she's a state rep. She's running for Massachusetts State Senate, huge advocate for criminal justice reform, just killing it in the Massachusetts state legislature. And I see that with other communities as well. So all that to say is there's some brilliant minds who are currently incarcerated, some extraordinary men and women. And I love what you said about second chances. We all deserve second chances, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh chances. And I just think about, this is a tangent, but I think about all the brothers and sisters who are currently doing time or have done time for selling marijuana. And now where we are now, where people are making billions of dollars selling marijuana legally, it just boggles the mind. It boggles the mind. I don't have a good answer for that, but yeah, I'm glad that people are coming home. I've dedicated my life to helping people stay home. I think people need support when they come home, both men and women, because it's not easy. I'm glad there's things like Ban the Box and what do you call it? What do they call it? Employers that are more friendly to people with criminal records and stuff like that. But there's a lot more work to be done. So yeah, but great question, Kelly. Other questions, thoughts, reflections? This is good. I've enjoyed this. We should do this. We should do this every week.
I feel like I'm on the fence as far as like meeting my dad. Like I feel like there's a lot of negative attributes that I don't want to have to deal with. Like because eventually if I meet him, like he's gonna have to die. Like, and I think thinking far ahead, that's something that I don't want to have to deal with. And just other things, because like he's human. He's gonna just he's gonna human. I don't know. So just like I don't know. Like there's I don't know if it's a good idea for me to like try to reach out or like 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 I'm not. I feel like I'm stuck in the middle of like what should I do?
Yeah. Okay. And how do you pronounce your first name, sis?
Leozar.
Leozar. Okay, that's a beautiful name. So all right. So people fall in like one or two camps, although there's probably more. A lot of people I meet are like, I have no desire to meet my father, or worse, like I don't want to meet that dude. He can go crawl up under a rock. Like there's some people that have that. If the hurt is so raw that they have no desire. Like my sister really never met her father. We have different fathers, but she has no desire. I grew up with her, same household. She has no desire to meet her father. And she had more information about him. I think at one point she knew where he lived and this and that. I meet other people who like literally they grew up on the same like block as their fathers and they still have no desire, to connect. They know where their father is and stuff like that. I, on the other hand, had a strong desire to meet my father. I felt like it was important. I felt like I had so many questions that I wanted answers to, that I didn't have an alternative to not meeting him. And so I'm a big fan, I'm a big encourager of people to look for their fathers. I make myself available if you ever want to talk offline or email or whatever. If you just need some encouragement, because I know it can be hard. It's an emotional roller coaster, but I think it's well worth it. I think it's well worth the journey. For me has been a healing one. I've grown, I've learned, I've processed, all that stuff. It's not easy, but I think it's well worth it. And and I oftentimes think that our fathers oftentimes carry shame associated with not being involved in the lives of their children. And so I think in some ways it's to reconnect is healing to them, to be able to let them know that you know, whether you forgive them or release them or whatever. So I would encourage you to do it. I think if you read the book, hopefully you'll get encouragement as well. I would say, I'll give you an example of my niece, my sister's daughter. His father was incarcerated for 10 years when she was young, and he really wasn't involved in her life. In fact, my brother-in-law, she kind of grew up thinking that my brother-in-law was her father. I don't know if y'all know what I'm talking about, but oftentimes many children are raised and they think that somebody else is their father. It's not really their father. So now that she's older and she realizes, no, that's not my biological father. This is my biological father. For years, she was like, I don't want anything to do with that. I already got a father. I got my stepfather. She don't call him a stepfather. I got my father. But now she's coming of age. She's about to graduate from BU. She's called Uncle Gene. And she's like venting to me, like, my father, I can't believe my father this, my father that. But I can hear it in her voice. She really longs to connect with her father. And so I told her, like, I'll stand with you. I'll go with you to meet with him. I'll be on the phone and stuff like that. I think it's a deep longing that we all have. And I would encourage you to go ahead and do it as long as it's safe. You know what I'm saying? I would encourage you to do it. You don't want to have regrets. So, yeah, and I know you mentioned like he'll pass eventually and stuff. Yeah, that's true, but I think it's well worth it. So, yeah.
Thank you. And then I also noticed like with some people there's like the regret of like meeting them and it's not like what they hoped.
That's a good point. Yeah, so let me just speak to that real quick. So it was funny. I met with a guy, a pretty senior guy in Boston in nonprofit and ministry circles years ago. And he hadn't met his father till he was in his 40s. And now bear in mind, I'm in my 20s then. So he's telling me the story about how he met his father, went down south to meet him for the first time in his 40s. And he said his father wasn't, I'm paraphrasing, like wasn't that impressive. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't all that he thought it was going to be, you know? And his father wasn't that enthusiastic about being involved in his life. And he said to me, he said, Gene, I want you to prepare yourself if you ever do meet your father, that you may be a better son to him than he is a father to you. And I think he was telling me, like, set your expectations now, because you know you don't want to be disappointed and so forth and so on. So I think there's some truth to that. You don't know what's going on with your father if you've never met him. You don't know the story, you don't know the context, you don't know the trauma he's experienced and all the stuff. Or you probably don't know his relationship with his father or his father's relationship with his father and the generational stuff. You know, oftentimes we just don't, as men, we don't learn how to be fathers. If we've never been taught, we don't know. And so, but I think it's worth knowing, whether even if it's not the best of circumstances, the best encounter, it's still worth knowing rather than not knowing, in my humble opinion. I've heard some horror stories, few and far between, where somebody connected with their father or whatever, or more so the mother of the child connected with the father, and the father said something like, I don't want anything to do with that child. but that's very few and far between. But yeah, so what I want to do, Pia, if you haven't done it already, I'm gonna put the link to where folks can get directly where they can get the book if they want it on Shopify. A lot of people say, is it on Amazon? No, it's not on Amazon. Amazon takes 65%, if y'all didn't know. So I'm not for that. Our e-commerce is with Shopify, so you'll see that in the chat.
Yes.
Thank you. And I do have one more question. There's also, I don't know, there's this thing I saw, this interview, this guy was, I think he's like a therapist for men who don't have their dads in their life. And one thing he mentioned, like, was a story switch. Like, his mom was abusing him, so he decided to reach out to his dad because he was like, I need a place to stay. And then his father was explaining to him like why he wasn't in his in his life, and he's basically saying like, your mother pushed me away. Like, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with like I don't know, like a light story or like the story switch?
Yeah. I would say that oftentimes in my experience, and this was the case with my sister and her and my niece and nephew's father, they were together. They weren't married, but they were together. She got pregnant. I think at some point there was some infidelity, right? And so, I'll just use my sister as an example. She got upset. She was pissed off, right? Like, basically, you broke trust, you cheated on me, this and that. And in that brokenness, in that hurt, in that resentment, she made a decision at that time, like, I don't want anything to do with you, right? And what that meant was she ended up moving cities. And what that meant was that their father wouldn't be involved in their life for decades, until this day, right? So my nephew's 30, my niece is like 22, and there's still really a lot of distance between their father and them. So mothers oftentimes do make decisions, and I think mothers generally make the best decision that they think is in the best interest of the child in the moment. I think they think like, this is what's best for my child. Like, I'll be the best. I'll protect my children. But then what happens years later, oftentimes when their children start to get a little older, oftentimes they might reflect on that decision and say, oh, well, maybe it's time for them to reconnect. Or maybe their children start asking questions like I did. I would say to mothers, if you at all have an opportunity to help facilitate your children's involvement with their father, as long as it's safe, I would say go ahead and do that. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if there's no romantic relationship, there's no feeling, even if you still have unresolved issues with him, I still think it's in the best interest of the child to at least try and attempt to make that connection. That's my humble opinion. But yeah, I think it's not all the fathers, just being like, it's not as simple as like, oh, he just was an absentee dad. There's oftentimes like a real story there.
Okay, thank you. And is there any way for us to reach you, or like?
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat. It's just eugene@fathersforward.com. Yep, and I'm always on my email. So go ahead and email me, and I have a special place in my heart for my brothers and sisters who grew up without their father. So happy to chat anytime.
If I can, I just wanted to reflect on something. First of all, again, thank you again. And I was thinking about your story, made me think about safe space, like fathers having safe spaces. Those safe spaces becoming brave spaces where you kind of described where you allow yourself to be vulnerable in front of your kids. And then I was thinking about sort of the gray space when I was listening to this woman who's supporting her husband connected with his father. So I just wanted to say thank you. I mean, I've had my father in my life, but my dad did not have his in his life. And a quick story. I was aware that you talk about having half a family tree. I didn't have, like, my grandparents weren't people I interacted with because they were absent. And I met my grandfather when I was like 21 at a funeral because I was like, that guy looks like me. And then my dad was like, oh, that's my father. I met him for 5 minutes. That was it. So I don't even know his name, actually. But I recognize things that my father fought with at a young age, just trying to be, like you said, he didn't have a model, so he's trying to like making it up, and he did a good job. But I thought about the gray space in terms of, you know, recognizing that being a father is a dynamic role. It's not static, even though the word has a fixed definition in a dictionary. It's not a fixed role. So I just want to say your comments and commentary have made me reflect on that. So I just want to say thanks.
No, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that, brother. Yeah, I think you brought up a point that I just want to make real quick, which is it's really important to understand your father's relationship with their own father, right? Like how that impacts them dramatically. The generation before us, fathers' roles were different. They weren't expected to be nurturers. They were oftentimes just work, provide, that's it, you know, so that emotional connection. And we don't know oftentimes the half of what they went through, what they've been through, and how maybe they passed down the cycle, right? So I think it's just important to try and get those answers. And once you have some of those answers, it helps you to kind of better understand.
Pull up your window. Pull up your window.
Yeah. I appreciate y'all rocking with us all this time. That's what's up. Pia, you got a good crew with you.
Thank you. You're very engaging. So everybody, I think, is very in tune with what you're saying, and it resonates for a lot of people in their own personal journey, as we're hearing. So it's important. And you speak a lot about healing, and this is part of the journey. And I wanted to point out that in the book, you shared about adopting your son, I think in 2019. Was that 2018? 2018?
Yeah, Franklin came to our house when he was 9 months old in 2018. He turns 5 in September. So he's been with us. Hey, little, hey. I love Zoom. I love to see people's kids on Zoom. But sorry, I got distracted. But yeah, so my wife, as I said earlier, she grew up with a lot of foster brothers and sisters, and then she also has an adopted brother. So just a big family, like I said. So she always wanted to kind of foster / adopt. I grew up with a tiny family, just me, my mother, and my sister. I didn't really think about it, but you know, God has been faithful to us, and we've been blessed. Like they say, be a blessed to be a blessing. So I guess now 5 years ago, we got trained and licensed to be foster parents, and with the hopes of eventually adopting. And yeah, so I got 3 sons and 1 daughter. I'm a big advocate for fostering and adopting. I think if you have love in your heart and home, to bring a child into your household, I think it's totally changed our lives. I used to think like, oh, we'll just help this needy kid, like, you know, but it's been like the opposite. Like Ferg like completes our household. Like he's amazing. My older biological kids love this dude. My wife, like he's been a game changer. And so we've been the one that's been blessed by him being part of our household. And it's just amazing, man. He's just a gift. And so especially for the men that might be on, I want you to consider exploring what that would look like to foster or adopt, because there's a lot of young people that don't have safe, healthy homes to go to. And if you can be that, at least explore it, at least look into it, you know.
Well, it struck me quite beautiful that as the book culminates, you share about that adoption and how it connects directly to the time period in which you're able to connect with your father's family. And you sort of end with, you know, a message to your father, and would he be proud of you, and if he sees what you're doing, but it feels like it's happening through your son. That because you were able to be in a vulnerable enough space to understand deeply what this child would feel like, and how important it was for you and your wife and your children to embrace him into your home, and now literally, embrace him as your own child, fully as your own child, that connectivity was because of you not having a connection with your earthly father or thinking that you didn't. And so he indeed is that in this part of the journey. And so that at the point you finally get to connect, it's all happening at the same time. It's just the way that the cycle of life works. It's like you have this new life that is going to really represent and give that full opportunity. So of course you have it with your own biological children, but it's a whole nother level of opportunity and another season of fatherhood that you're being brought to be able to share that with someone that isn't necessarily biologically from you. But you speak about your heavenly father meeting you at 17. So it is showing us like you're adopted by sonship, Abba. So you're gonna call me Abba, Father. That's exactly what is happening now at this part of the season. And now your book is out, and the level of healing that's happening right here, and undoubtedly in all the places and spaces you've already spoken at, and will continue to be revealed even from folks here, I'm sure, that will connect with you and invite you different spaces. So just wishing you amazing blessings, and know that it is a journey of healing for all of us. And we appreciate you as a survivor. And, we just hope to continue to grow and flourish together.
Amen. Amen. Nah, it's a privilege. And as I see this young man on the screen, man, I'm encouraged. I do want to make a point that I'm also mindful of my son Franklin, that his biological father and mother care for him deeply as well, and they both have their own set of challenges that prevented them from being able to care for him. But it's really important to me that Franklin knows that his biological father loves him, wants to be involved in his life. It's not easy to navigate that balance, but I just know from experience that as he gets older, he'll have questions about his biological parents. And I want to maintain as best kind of communication relationship with them so that he's able to get those answers from his parents. So, Paw Patrol. Oh yeah, I'm about that Paw Patrol life. Paw Patrol. Anyway, yeah, Franklin loves that Paw Patrol. If you're not onto the Paw Patrol, you need to be onto the Paw Patrol. But Pia, yeah, I literally could stay on. I'm at a hotel in Boston, so I'm on vacation while my wife takes care of the 4 kids.
Oh, wow.
So I can stay on as long as necessary. I ain't got to put nobody to bed. I don't got to wake up early in the morning with no 4-year-olds. But this has been amazing. I would love to stay connected. As Pia said, if you feel like, you're part of an organization that maybe wants to have a conversation about fatherhood, I would love to be part of that. I would love to answer any other questions that folks have. My email's in the chat. I'll put the link to the book. Hopefully you grab it.
Yes, make sure you get the book. Yeah.
On I'm on Facebook, Eugene Schneeberg, Instagram, all of that.
What's your Instagram name? Because it's not your regular name.
I knew you was gonna ask me that. Let me see. I think my Instagram is, let me see, hold on. I should know that. Okay, I'll put it in the chat. REPJC247. So like Rep JC, like Jesus Christ, Rep JC247. That's pretty easy. So maybe I'll put that.
And LinkedIn, tell them your LinkedIn handle as well.
So LinkedIn, isn't LinkedIn your name? I think LinkedIn's just my name. I think.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure to send out an email with everything together, so that your Father's Forward website and information, all your social media handles, your link to the book, everything, so people could get in touch with you. Certainly buy the book, buy copies for friends, libraries, schools, syllabi, whatever you got going on, because this certainly needs to be in everybody's hands. And then it sounds like you're willing to facilitate groups as well around the book. and around people's healing in the journey, and also even around exploration of finding fathers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm honored to meet y'all virtually. I'm humbled by the fact that y'all stayed on almost 2 hours on a Friday night.
Friday night.
Oh man. You know, Kelly's outside. It all got dark in Philly. So man, it's an honor, it's a privilege. Your questions were great. Pia, I think it speaks to, you know, your character and your impact that all these folks are rocking with you. So keep doing what you're doing. It's a privilege to be on with you. And yeah. So I look forward to hearing about what y'all think about the book and seeing social media posts and all of that, and hearing stories, you know, because I think there's a need for a lot of healing. I think, yeah, all of us are on this earth because our mother and father came together at one point, right? And so that's like that's as basic as it gets. And so when that's disrupted, it creates I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but a rift, a schism or something. And I think there's a need for healing. And so, yeah, like I said, I'm glad to meet y'all. Follow me, like me, message me. I'll follow you and all of that stuff so I can check out what y'all are doing. But thank you for listening, and hope you enjoy the book.
Thank you, Eugene. And before we log off, if people are able, wherever they are, can we do a picture? If you can just kind of wave, and I'll just do a picture with the phone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to close us out with some of the music. So Eugene weaves music throughout every single chapter, and of course, scriptures, just representing his entire experience. I'll be sharing the playlist with you all that is fueled by the music that he shares. So this is Dear Hip Hop by Bizzle. So I see he got that gospel hip hop vibe.
It's me, your foster child. I'm writing this because I feel we should sit and talk a while. It may sound like I'm crazy, but I feel like your baby.
So thank you all for joining. Stay connected, ProfessorPia.com, and you can check me out on Instagram, Professor Pia Instagram, and Pia Raymond Hargrove on LinkedIn. And I'll be sure to send out all the information so you can stay in touch with Eugene and his work and his journey.
You said you never want to fight, son. Use a gun. See, when you use a gun, you don't have to respect them. You can just talk to them how you want them.
Hey, Eugene, you got a lot of DC, Maryland area people on here too.
Okay, that's yeah, send me the playlist, and yeah, I will talk about. Yeah, there's a lot of secular artists make songs about their fathers, and a lot of Christian artists do as well. A lot.
DMX on here too. You know how to tell
a little.
New York hip hop in there.
A little bit of that. So I'm gonna update that with. I got some more songs. I mean, just profound, brilliant brothers and sisters, really putting like their story over hot tracks, you know. So